right, so we're gonna go up to Nijah Wilson. Now, I connected with her because she's now my new sister. In CBW here in Queen City Metropolitan City chapter. So yes. But we met. I want a little story about how we met. So I came up to her. She was over to help. She's a part of the health committee, and we just started talking about maternal health. I was telling her what I do, and she really poured into me her story, and she didn't have to. She poured into me about her passion about health equity and her own experiences with her maternal journey. And that was something that I said, this lady has a story to tell. She is not only about how to make things better, but the practices of such as yoga and her advocacy work, how to heal ourselves, how to mentally center and balance ourselves. So my sister, Nijah, please hop on and tell us about your story, your birthing story, and how your work helps with navigating Black women advocacy.
Thank you, Neshe. Thank you so much for inviting me to this, and thank you to all the women that showed up. As you said, I am so passionate about Black maternal health because I'm a Black woman. My mother is a Black woman. My grandmother is a Black woman. My great-grandmother is a Black woman, and all the mothers before them are Black women, and my daughter is a Black woman. And should she choose to have a child, I don't want her experience to be mine.
Mm.
I don't want her experience to be my mother's experience in the trauma part of the experience. Because at the end of it, there was, for me, three beautiful children, but there was trauma along the way. And so, in the interest of time, I will tell you about one experience that I had before. No, it was after my first child. I was in my early 20s and I was having pain in my side. And it wasn't your normal period pain. It was something a lot sharper. I thought it might have been appendicitis. So I went to the hospital, excuse me, and I saw a white doctor there. And he didn't touch me. He didn't put his stethoscope on me. He didn't do a sonogram. There was no x-ray. He said, "You have an ovarian cyst." And he gave me a gown and he told me to get undressed. And he told me that he would be removing my ovary right then. They would be moving me to an OR to remove my ovary. I was 21 or 22 years old. At that point, I had one child. He did not ask me if I had children, if I desired to have children. He just said he was going to remove my ovary. And because I have the mother that I do, I watched her from the time I was young advocate, show up to school board meetings, show up to PTA meetings, show up to parent teacher conferences, write letters, and all of that. I put my clothes on and I said, "We're not doing this today. You will not be removing my ovaries, sir. How are you just going to decide I have an ovarian cyst without a test, a blood, I mean, no urine. I didn't even pee in a cup. He just walked into the room and said, 'You have an ovarian cyst and we need to take your ovary.'" So I got dressed. Of course, he wanted, he was persisting and said that it was necessary. And I told him that I was not prepared to lose an ovary that day. So that was a Saturday. I went to my OB on Monday. And thankfully, I had a Black OB. It was a male, and he had delivered my first child. And he said to me something that I thought I knew. I think I might have known this at the time, but if I didn't, he educated me. There are times of the month when women will have ovaries on their cyst, and it's normal, and it's nothing to be removed.
Mm.
It's nothing harmful to your body. It's not harmful to your reproductive system. It's normal. They come and then they go. And under no circumstances should he have said you needed to have your ovary removed. And I'm glad you got up and left because he would have done it. So that is just one example that I have where I feel like the health equity is not there. There are many health inequities as they pertain to Black and Brown women. And if we do not advocate for ourselves, then we will fall victim to being sterilized and mistreated and potentially die at their hands because they do not care or they do not show care. So that is just one example of an experience that I have. My last birth was the birth of my daughter, my only girl, my baby girl, my precious baby girl. And that birth was a C-section. It was my second C-section. And shortly after the baby was born, my daughter was removed from my womb, I started to feel different. And as Ashley said, and I think Alexis also said, it's important to know your body. So yoga is very important. So is breath work. So are somatic exercises. Those things are important because it helps you to tune in and get in tune with your body and know what's taking place in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I know my body, I am the expert on my body. And I remind every doctor that I see that I am the expert in the room. You may have a doctor degree, an MD, you may have the loans to prove it, right? But I'm the expert on my body. I know when something is not right. And so because I was the expert in the room when my child was being born by C-section, I leaned over to the sister who was my anesthesiologist. And funny story, she happened to be a sister I knew. When I walked into the room, I was like, Lisa. And she was like, Nijah. So I knew the anesthesiologist. So when I started to feel different, I looked to my right and I said, Lisa, I don't feel good. My head is starting to hurt. My head is pounding. Lisa, I feel like I'm going to throw up. And within seconds of that, my OB, who I trusted and had a relationship with him at that point, we were probably 6 years into our relationship. He had done my previous C-section 2.5 years prior. So we were going together. We were an item. So within moments of me saying that to Lisa, he cleared the room. He cleared the operating room. My partner was ushered out quickly. The baby was ushered out quickly. And I just heard him saying repeatedly, I need another lap band. Very quietly, very calmly. It sounded like he was saying, I need a lap band. And there are a couple of doctors on the line. Maybe you're familiar with that term. But it sounded like he just kept saying, I need another lap band. And at some point, just started saying, lap band, lap band, lap band, lap band. And he was quiet, he was calm, everybody in the room was calm. And when he was done, he came around the curtain and he let me know what happened. And like I said, me and this man at this point, we were going together. So he had the bedside manner. He was a doctor that I knew, that I trusted, that I picked. He knew my family. And so he let me know that there was a lot of bleeding that he had to get under control. And so that is what was taking place. And that is why he removes, my partner and the baby from the room. He let me know that there would be some blood products given to me when I went to the ICU. And that was where I went and was cared for very well by the nurses on staff. And I mentioned my mother earlier. One thing that I didn't know, well, let me say this first. When I was in the ICU, maybe an hour or two after giving birth, my family came to visit me. My parents, my partner, my oldest son, who was 17 at that time, and another person or two. So they came to see me, they spent some time with me, and then they left. And I spent the entire night in the ICU. I did not go to a room until the next day at about noon because they were monitoring me closely. My blood pressure was very low.
Mhm.
And so they were caring for me.
Mhm.
My daughter is 17 now. A couple of years ago, my mother and I were talking, and my mother said to me, I called your doctor when I left the hospital because I didn't like the way you looked. And I was like, what? She said, yes, I called him. I had to leave a message, and he called me back a couple of hours later. One, he apologized for the delay. He told me he was delivering babies.
Mhm.
And then he asked me what I was calling about. He stayed on the phone with me for 25 minutes because I needed him to know what I was looking at when I saw you. I
Mhm.
needed him to know that you didn't look good to me. And I wanted to know what was going on and what he was doing.
Mhm.
And so she relayed this story to me and I just welled up. One, I didn't know that my mother did that.
Yeah.
I didn't know. We never had the conversation. I didn't know. And so I say all that to say it is so important for us, one, to trust your doctor. And if you don't trust him, as the people who went before me said, find another. It's very important to trust your doctor and for them to know how important you are to your family.
Mhm.
That doctor who delivered my daughter delivered my son 2.5 years before. A year and a half before that, he did my myomectomy. For at least 3 years before that, he saw me as a regular GYN patient. So we knew each other. But before my myomectomy, I said, Dr. Rayner, do you mind if I bring my mother to my next visit because I want you to meet her? He had no problem with that. If a doctor has a problem meeting your family, I wouldn't want them to do anything for me. So he met my mother, my father, my partner, my oldest son. He met my family. And I believe that one, he and I had a relationship before this event of my daughter's birth. But two, he knew that somebody else loved me and he was going to have to face someone. So know who your doctor is. Make sure they know who loves you. And yes, you are your best advocate, but have someone else, I would say, who will advocate for you when you're not in the room.
Mhm.
Now, my doctor knew my birth plan and he knew what I wanted and how I wanted everything to go. But when I was in ICU, struggling to stay awake because I was afraid to go to sleep that night because I saw my blood pressure so low. I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to bond with my baby girl before I leave this earth. So
Mhm.
I tried to stay up. My
Mhm.
mother was advocating for me. She was in the doctor's ear. So
Mhm.
know your doctor.
Mhm.
Have someone in addition to yourself who can advocate for you. And then the third thing that I'll leave us with, um, one thing that wasn't mentioned is tell your story, tell your business. We don't like to tell our business because we like, oh, I don't want people to know my business. I don't want people to know my business.
Mhm. Mhm.
F that. Tell your story. It might help another sister, but it could also help your life.
Yep.
I had to go to the ER. I had to go to urgent care once. I forget what I went for, but I wasn't urgent care. It was orthopedic care, ortho care. And I was having a problem with my shoulder. And so the woman was taking my history. So I was telling her everything. And after she finished, she looked at me and she said, thank you so much for telling me all of that. Most people don't give so much information. I said, well, I want you to know. I want you to have a complete picture of who I am before you give me anything, before you treat me. You need to know who I am.
Mm.
So tell your story to the doctors that treat you and to your friends and people who even aren't your friends. Just tell them.
Mhm.
Tell your story to the men in your lives, your sister friends, your family. Tell your business. Tell
Mhm.
your business.
I love that. Oh, I love that. And I'm telling, and going back to what I mentioned, like after I had my miscarriage, if I would never said anything, I wouldn't have known how common it is to have miscarriages, right? And the fact that you are able to allow your provider to become your family. I would never think about that. Like, being able to meet them and they be able to contact them. That's crucial. And that can put us in a safe space when they know who we are, who our family are, and what we do. That can change how people treat us.